I'm Noortje Marres. I'm a senior lecturer in sociology at Goldsmiths. I'm a convener of the program in Digital Sociology, and I'm here to speak with Deborah Lupton about her new book called Digital Sociology. To start with, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, Deborah Lupton. So I'm a centenary research professor at the University of Canberra in Australia. And I guess my sort of research areas cover a whole range of interests, but lately it's very much been digital sociology. So hence writing the book with that title.
Yeah, fabulous. I wanted to ask you if you could position your book in relation to related fields like digital anthropology, because many people will come to this book asking what's the difference and what's the relation between those fields. And in your book, you make some remarks answering that question. And you use the term social world. You say sociologists bring to digital technology an interest in social worlds, and this is one of the things that might differentiate digital sociology from digital anthropology. Could you say a bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, I guess digital anthropologists tend to often focus on cultures and very specific cultures. I mean, that's all part of the tradition of anthropology, that one goes and does field work, one lives in a specific bounded geographical location and conducts your field work there, and you get to know in great detail about that particular culture in that specific location. And that comment that I made about the social world is actually in response to Danny Miller and Heather Horst's editorial for their edited book on digital anthropology, where they talk about how it's important for anthropologists to understand humans' encounters with digital technologies, because they would argue that the digital is now contributes to a great extent to what makes us human. And I was quite struck by that terminology about making us human. And what I do in response to that quote from their book is that I say, and as a sociologist, I'm not only interested in what makes us human and how digital technologies contribute to that, but also in how it contributes to the social world that we're contextualised in. So I think sociologists more perhaps than anthropologists, although there is clearly a big overlap between what the two do, tend to widen out their interest from a very specific kind of fieldwork context, culture or group, to society in general. So I guess I'm using the term social world to encapsulate social institutions, social encounters, social relations, our sense of ourselves. So it's about being human, but it's also specifically in relation to digital sociology, it's about how being human is imbricated within our social relations outside of our own humanity and the social groups that we're part of.
Yeah, one of the other interesting things that the phrase social world does, I think, is that it suggests a complexity that is maybe not captured by notions like social dynamics or social interaction or perhaps also social behavior. And I would like to ask a second question that relates to that. In the book, you draw quite a sharp distinction, I think, between sociology and computational social science. And in that regard, studying the social world is perhaps also suggests a difference from the thing that computational social science studies. But another thing that struck me about your account of computational social science regards their methods. You suggest in the book that computational social science and digital social research draw their methods largely from computer science. And I was surprised by that remark because many of the methods of digital social research, like network analysis, might also be considered sociological methods. So could you elaborate on what you meant?
Well, those comments were really based on when I was sort of investigating how the term digital sociology has tended to be used in the literature or even online. who is using this term? When I first became interested in this whole concept of digital sociology, and I actually became interested in it when I came across digital anthropology. And I thought to myself, okay, digital anthropology is a well-established field of research, but digital sociology is not a term that tends to be used very often. And of course, here at Goldsmiths, there's a Master's in Digital Sociology, and that's, as far as I know, the only degree that has that title so far. And in sociology, we have tended to use a whole raft of titles, cyber sociology, e-sociology, sociology of the internet. And what I argue in the book is that digital sociology, again, is more encompassing, because it's not just about the internet, it's also about the devices, the wearable devices that we may use, and the apps that are on those devices. So we've now now that we're in Web 2.0 and moving towards Web 3.0, the Internet of Things and the interlinking of smart objects, and sensor society in which our movements are tracked, when we go out in public space, for example. That's why I think the term digital sociology is way more encompassing than previous terms that sociologists used. And in relation to computational social science, the references that I could find in the literature and in the popular literature on computational social science tended to be very specifically about computing science rather than about sociology. Mm. So sociologists don't tend to use that terminology themselves. It's quite, if you look at the sociological literature, so it's the way that term is used is kind of used mostly in computing science or in professional sort of data science analysis. And what I also argue is, and I'm certainly not the only one who's argued this, is that sociologists have yet to acquire those skills. There's only a very small number of sociologists who know anything about computing, social science or those sorts of computational methods. So I'm not saying they're necessarily opposed. What I'm saying is that thus far they haven't been incorporated into sociology. Sociologists haven't really started to engage with those approaches. And I do argue that, sociologists to some extent should start to engage with those approaches. It doesn't mean everyone has to, but it should be an important part of digital sociology, amongst many other things.
Yeah. Well, perhaps following on from that, is that in the book you give you grant a central role to the use of digital technology and users, which puts us in terrain that's more familiar to sociology and the sociology of technology historically. And you do it in two ways. I think you suggest that digital sociology should really be studying practices of use, of using, but also that digital sociologists should adopt the role of users of digital more actively and explicitly. So I wanted to ask you, to what extent for you digital sociology is a sociology of users and of use?
Well, I think you're right there in that it is an important part of my view, and I should just state from the outset that the book is about my perception of what digital sociology is, and that I'm only, I'm one sociologist who has my own kind of view of what the term encompasses, and there may be, I'm sure there are other sociologists who have a whole different view of what it should be or what it could be. But in terms of my own perception of what it is and could be, yes, sociology of use and users is important. And yes, maybe digital sociologists should be engaging using digital media. They don't have to be, though. I don't think they necessarily have to be doing digital sociology. And as you say, there is a long tradition of sociologists researching digital use ever since personal computers became popular in the late 1980s. There has been a sociology of digital use, and I myself was doing that sort of work in the 90s. So there is a long tradition of that. But I think in addition to that, there are other very interesting things that we should be doing, and that is, for example, it can be about the content, not just about the use or use or users, about the actual content. And I wrote a paper recently called Apps as Artifacts, arguing that why is it that sociologists haven't investigated apps, not just how people use them, but the actual content of apps as cultural artifacts, because they're the products of human decision making, and they represent and reflect assumptions and norms. and reproduce those and, perhaps make some new ones. And so I think that's an important part of sociological analysis. And also analysing the tools of research, which I argue in the book, in the chapter on reconceptualising methods, is also an incredibly interesting part of the reflexive sociology that I see as another central aspect of digital sociology, that reflexive use of digital tools and positioning ourselves when we are using them, and understanding how that affects our own practices, our own positioning as sociologists or as academics, our own positioning as researchers. So that to me is a crucial aspect of digital sociology.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because that means you also suggest that the category of use cannot capture the whole of what is sociological about technology. So I think that's interesting. As a last question, which does partly bring us back to this question of use, is that you place sociologists using digital devices within the frame of digital sociology. So in that sense, your digital sociology is one that moves beyond the sociology of, which is defined only in terms of its object. Yet, in many ways, it's a risky or dangerous move to make, I think, insofar as you speak quite explicitly about the sociologist's challenge or concern with promoting their own work. And I think to foreground the promotional makes very good sense in relation to digital in particular, because so much of digital culture is about promotional culture. Yet I wanted to ask whether you also see other models besides a narrowly promotional one for how sociology profiles itself in digital media. I mean, is a suggestion of more mystique around sociology or a partial invisibility of the researcher, is that something that becomes attractive again in this particular context?
I would argue not, only because I think that we are imbricated within sort of the digital representation of ourselves as academics, whether we like it or not. We can't opt out now. I mean, Google Scholar is collecting our citations, automatically as we speak. That is, and people can look that up online anytime they want. So there are many ways in which we, just like any other member of society, can't opt out of being encapsulated within digital data, becoming a data subject. And what I would argue, and what I do argue in the book, is that if we take we can either sit back and allow that representation, our data doubles, our data representation, to be generated by digital technologies and platforms like Google Scholar, for example, or we can actually take a role in shaping our personae on online forums. And so it's, I guess, to say that's promotional is probably limiting it a little bit, because, for example, in my own use of digital media, in my own blog, for example, it's often about thinking aloud in public. It's not about necessarily I want people to know what I'm publicising my book or my latest article. It's often just, and there's this talk of the academic gift economy. I actually see it as part of that other people have talked about, for example, in relation to blogging, that as part of the gift economy, we're sharing something of our thoughts and feelings in a way that's not narrowly about promotion. It's actually about enjoying that public thinking aloud and enjoying the opportunity for other people to engage with us on that forum. So it goes well beyond the promotional. And I really don't think, I think in this day and age, none of us can be invisible anymore. So why not use that to our advantage and be part of the academic gift economy?
Okay, well, thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
Yeah.